When you've got sciatica, you usually hear the same thing: nerve root, herniated disc, or bulge. Something's being pinched, and that's why it typically hurts really badly. But in my experience, that usually has nothing to do with it, and that's why the problem usually doesn't get solved and just keeps persisting. In this video, I'll explain where the pain really comes from, stuff you've probably never heard before, and why that'll calm you down right away. First off, you don't need to worry at all, because for most people, "I've got sciatica" is a black box. They have no clue what's actually going on. We're going to completely get rid of that today. And if you can grasp what's going on, you'll feel totally calm and at ease. Let's first take a look. What's the nerve behind sciatica exactly, and where does it come from? So it comes out down here from the lower part of the lumbar spine and partly from the sacrum. Those are the nerve roots that come out there, and they all run together into one single bundle. And they come together right here at this spot. That's where this bundled nerve forms. It's about thumb thick, really massive and solid, very dense indeed. And then it basically comes out here, runs along the back of the thigh, over the back of the knee, down the calf, or actually here in the hollow of the knee. It is also important to note for diagnosis and treatment. It branches there. Part of it continues down here, along the calf, all the way down into the foot and even right to the toes, and in all those spots. You can get pain. The main pain is in the lower back area, by far the most common. Maybe you've experienced that. Then it continues into the glutes, spreading right through that whole area. Then there's a persistent pulling pain running down along the length of the thigh here. It really hurts in the back of the knee quite a bit. It hurts down the calf, and it can hurt in the foot. So basically everywhere that this nerve runs, you can get pain. And it's natural to think, aha, there's the nerve. Everywhere along its course there's pain, really, and it can even flare up in spots. It's most likely the nerve is irritated up here at the nerve roots, where those tiny segments all join together and effectively fuse into a tight nerve bundle. And those are different nerve signals supplying different parts of the leg and foot, each controlling certain muscles and skin areas. And that's how this theory came about, that the pain that shows up there always has to do with this nerve up here being affected by a herniated disc, a vertebra, a disc bulge, or by a narrowing of the nerve canal itself, causing irritation or compression of the nerve and thus producing those typical radiating pains. And that'll cause the pain, and then they start looking, okay. You might know, if you've already been through it, they do imaging tests and then they look more closely into it. They're looking for what's up here, especially after herniated discs. Things that could explain it, like structural causes. But often they find nothing, and even when they do, they'll usually inject something up there or end up performing surgery instead, which is what usually happens. But often the problem wasn't resolved at all because of that, and during the early days of our therapy, we increasingly experienced that. Those exact pains that are described there kept coming back and persisting despite the treatments, and didn't ease. All these pains in the glutes, in the back, the glutes, the backside, the thigh, the back of the knee, the calf, and right down into the foot, are basically really easy to get rid of by releasing the corresponding tensions in the muscles and fascia that are involved get released. So that moved further and further away from the conventional theory that something's being pressed here, that the nerve fibers are somehow being squeezed, and then the nerve would, so to speak, carry that pressure sensitivity from up here corresponding to the nerve fibers that were affected, transmitting a felt sensation down the line into those distant areas and causing secondary pain responses in the tissues they connect to. Sending it here, sending it there, sending it somewhere else, because we could, without taking this area up here into account, pretty much turn off the pain down here. So just to make it clear again, if the nerve that runs from up here down to down here is being compressed up here, then shouldn't it actually also, up there, where it's being compressed, hurt? So why doesn't it hurt where it's being pressed? Why does it instead start hurting really badly, way down there in his glutes? You could say, well, it's still pretty localized, but there are also cases sometimes where the pain travels down the entire leg, even all the way into the foot and so on, and it tingles and all those kinds of sensations. And why does the heart really show up down here and not up here where it actually happens? That always seemed totally pointless to me. Maybe drop a comment below, please, saying where you feel it. Where exactly is the pattern showing up? Where do you notice it most? Where more? Where less? And now there are two possibilities. So with this conventional theory that up here a herniated disc is pressing on something, let's stick with that example. Now there are two possibilities. One is that there's actually a herniated disc, and then they operate on it. Then, whatever's bulged out there, whatever's leaked out, gets cut away, so there's space again. And then the operation's over, and initially it's fine, and half a year later it starts up again, often much worse and painful in the glutes or in the calf. Or you might not even notice any damage to the disc, and in that case, they will usually treat it conservatively with injections as a first step. Then painkillers are injected into this whole area, and it may help or it may not, but more often than not, the relief isn't permanent. You might know that from yourself too. It's fine for a week, maybe two, and then it starts again. It can reach the point where people go to get that injection once a month or even every 2 weeks, sometimes. And of course I say, for God's sake, don't do that, because every time it's an intervention in the body's biochemistry. And there has to be an underlying cause that can be fixed permanently. We'll get to that. This traditional explanation for how pain develops increasingly clashed with our experience that lower back pain is, in most cases, fairly easy to fix and can usually be resolved with relatively simple measures in a short time, if you know how. Simply by normalizing the excess tension in the muscles and fascia up here at the front of the body and back here, letting the strain ease so posture and normal movement can be restored. And when the tensions are normalized, the back pain in that area is then generally completely gone. This happens partly because our therapists use what's called osteopressure, a technique to release tension there. It's a method where certain receptors on the bone are affected, which, as we explain it, are able through the brain to effectively normalize the tension in specific muscles, helping to restore balanced muscle function and movement. And then the pain eases, usually in the first treatment, or our Liebscher and Bracht exercises, where basically the same thing happens, but through your own effort, where we do specific stretches. And by doing those stretches, the tension in the muscles and fascia evens out and the pain goes away, and finally goes completely away. And that wasn't just for the back, it was for the glutes too. I can remember lots of patients who came to me with the diagnosis of ischialgia, sciatica, or something in their head. I treated them. And completely independent of that nerve diagnosis, I just relaxed the muscles and fascia, and then the glute pain went away, and most of them felt much better right away and stayed pain-free for weeks. It eased off and was under control. And the same with the pain at the back of the thighs too. Normalize the tension in the muscles and fascia, do the exact same for the back of the knee, and likewise for the calf and foot as well. And alongside realizing that most of these pains are fairly easy to get rid of if you know how, our pain explanation model naturally came about. And now it gets interesting for you because this is very, very different from how pain is usually explained. It basically means the pain isn't from something broken, damaged, or from wear and tear. It's functional pain caused by altered bodily function, not structural damage due to altered nervous system processing. Oh God, what's a functional pain? It's simple. A functional pain isn't structural. It's not from structural damage. If structural, it's broken. Bone's broken, disc is broken, something's off. Functionally, nothing has to be broken. Maybe for you. Really, really interesting now to find out that most back pain is actually functional in most cases. How do I come to that notion? 90% plus or minus, 90% of back pain is non-specific. What do you mean by non-specific? Non-specific means they don't find anything. There's nothing actually broken in there, really. They blame the psyche for it somehow and stuff. Yeah, but that's honestly just a convenient excuse. There's simply nothing broken and the pain's still there, and they call that non-specific. And it's not just in the back. There are non-specific pains all over the body. That's a nice word that kind of glosses things over. It should really mean we don't know how this pain actually comes about or originates. And then it's labeled non-specific. And even today, conventional medicine still hasn't figured out these non-specific pains. There's no explanation. People guess, like I said, maybe it's psychological or some other influence. But that's not settled. If you've understood our model of alarm pain, then you've now, for yourself, clearly and practically clarified what non-specific pain actually is in real terms. Because those are pains where nothing is broken. You go for an X-ray, an MRI, a CT scan, nothing turns up. And our alarm pain model, pain that hurts even though nothing is broken, is exactly the explanation for these non-specific pains, which even to this day still can't be satisfactorily explained by conventional medical means. But now, exactly what is alarm pain? We said it's a functional pain. Nothing actually has to be broken. But why does it happen in the first place? It happens, our explanation, because the moment more and more tension builds up in the muscles and fascia, which, for example, squeeze the vertebral bodies together and increase pressure between them, where the discs are loaded, which press on the hip joint, push the head into the socket, and in the knee joint, squeeze the bones together so the menisci get pressed, and the cartilage is consequently also compressed noticeably. Alarm pain is the body's way of preventing damage that would otherwise occur because of these excessive pressures on tissues and joints. So we want to prevent osteoarthritis, to stop a herniated disc from happening, and to really prevent a meniscus tear. That's what the alarm pain is for. I'll explain exactly what's going on in this area. What do I do now? I'm sitting so I can comfortably explain a whole lot to you, but you probably sit down a lot too. We as a society sit far too much without making up for it. And not just at our desks, while eating, at the movies, in the car, on the train, and many even sleep sitting upright. Why? In the side position, with their knees pulled up. They sleep sitting up, they're basically on their side, but in a seated position. And what happens there? Up here at the front, you've got the hip flexors. The hip flexor of the right leg runs from here across the groin. A really large muscle. It runs right across the abdominal cavity. One portion attaches to the lumbar spine, and the other portion reaches down into the pelvis right here, actually. And this muscle lifts the leg. Or when you're lying on your back, it lifts the torso, pulling your upper body up, helping you sit up easier. So what happens to this muscle if we sit all the time? Does it get shorter or longer then? Think about it. If the legs are like this, the muscle is attached here at this point. I'll show you so it's easier to see, maybe here at this point. When it goes up, then you see, I'll just leave my finger here. Where it is now when I'm standing and there, do you see how much shorter it gets? Exactly the distance from this exact spot on my thigh to the very tip of my finger. If you sit all the time now, your body gets used to it. Why does the body get used to that? The body is kind of a biological instrument, so to speak. And it's always training. Everything we do is training for the body. Why? Because the muscles and also the fascia, other areas, other structures of the body, but above all the muscles and the fascia, if they're kept short, they'll slowly get used to it over time. With the fascia, you can easily picture that actually happening. Take a pair of pantyhose. They're incredibly stretchy, and when you let go, they return to their original shape. No wrinkling. And this mesh-like structure, in fascia research, this type of structure is often described, is what gives the tissue its very flexible properties. And at the moment, when that intestinal stocking is no longer under tension but is pulled tightly together, it really doesn't make any practical difference to the intestinal stocking at all because it is dead material. But the fascia is alive. So when the fascia gets into that position, that nice shear of the structure, the part that's nice and giving, is changed, and therefore its mechanical behavior changes. There are knots, there are tangles, there are cross links that form because the fascia is alive like a three-dimensional spider web, constantly shifting and interweaving. And the spider in it that spins the web. In the body, they're small living units, tiny particles that weave the fascia, reinforce it, remove parts, and constantly rebuild and renew it, depending on what the body does. So, if a fascia keeps getting stretched long, then short again, then long again, then short again, it will indeed retain that exact same property over time, to go along nicely in any position. I like to show this on the arm because if you look here at the muscles on the inside, the flexors, Imagine them. They're now long and stretched. The extensors out here on the outside are short. Now I bend the arm. They had to get longer, and these ones here are noticeably short by comparison, as you can see indeed. If I imagine that the arm only moves in that area, and that length is no longer taken up by the flexors, and that length is no longer taken up by the extensors, then they just get shorter, more and more tangled up, and the muscles, they gradually get used to that tension. So they get used to not letting go for as long as would be necessary, even when the body needs more time to fully release the tension. Because, back to sitting. We always sit like that without balancing it out. And now think, if the front here is shortened, what do I have to do to lengthen it again? And how would I go about doing that? That would be neutral. But neutral isn't enough. I want to even it out so that it feels slightly more balanced throughout the body overall. So that it's balanced and not that it's the thing being balanced. So I have to move further back. Yeah, now you can see it. It's doing exactly what the shortened part at the front does, especially the hip flexor. That was our example. That stretches it again, and then when I'm leaning forward like this and do the same thing backwards, I end up in the neutral position where it's relaxed again and the body is back to its normal tension. So everything returns to its usual alignment and balanced state, with the muscles no longer tensed. And if you do exactly what I just showed here, or if it's caused by osteoporosis, then for example this spot where the muscle inserts gets steady, continuous pressure applied to it over time. Then that relaxes, and in that moment it's like a little miracle, which is pure biomechanics and our knowledge, and almost instantly the pain here, in the back, is immediately and noticeably switched off by the brain, because it's no longer needed. Imagine. You've got too much pull in the front, you're being pulled forward, the back section, you can't see it now. Imagine that, I'm now grabbing my shirt at the back, pulls me back again, where's that pulling to? That's pulling right onto the discs. And if that pull normalizes now, the rail screw won't be loaded anymore. And the body tells the brain, okay, we'll simply switch off this alarm pain right away and temporarily. That's functional pain. Its job is to warn us. And if the warning's no longer needed because the tensions have normalized, the brain will simply switch that warning function off completely and leave it deactivated. So, we don't see pain at all as something bothersome, as something negative or even remotely problematic. Sure, it hurts, but not because it's out to do harm, or that you don't know what's punishing you. It actually has a very specific function, an alarm function. And earlier we were on the topic of injections. If I inject in there now, and the cause, namely the excessive tension in the muscles and fascia, isn't removed, it'll keep hurting. If this injection manages to ease the tension, there are often relaxants in these shots. It will help for a while, but then it starts up again because the cause hasn't been resolved. Because the cause is still the same. We've been going around this here. The cause is still that we sit too much, and we really have to make up for it as soon as possible. That's the hard law of our understanding. You can only take away most of the body's pain by addressing, in particular, what has developed one-sidedly, what has shortened, what is overly tense, bring it back to normal, and then the pain loses its function and purpose, and the body, really the brain itself, simply switches it off completely. And why doesn't the surgery help? The surgery that was done for a slipped disc. Because when the herniated discs, which is a symptom of too much tension, is taken out, it's usually better for a while because the surgery comes with anesthesia, and with that, a temporary muscle relaxation that eases the pain. That they cut there, tensions shift, and that anesthesia effect eventually wears off. It lasts a few weeks or months, then often comes back. Everyone asks, I had surgery, why is it back? Yeah, I'll explain it to you. The cause still hasn't been removed, or if it was partly removed by chance, unintentionally, then it's come back now through your everyday life, habits, and daily routines once more. Sitting a lot without balancing it out, it came back gradually over time through your daily routine. So the pain's back and the surgery was just symptom treatment because it didn't do anything to the root cause. And I can tell you something really interesting about that, which actually proves it too. In one training, I had orthopedists, doctors, naturopaths, physiotherapists, even career changers actively looking for practical skills. I actually had one in there, a Russian physician. And when I'd explained it, more or less, he raised his hand and spoke up. Roland, may I say something to you, if I may? Now I really know what my colleagues in the Urals are up to. Huh, what are your colleagues in the Urals up to? He basically explained that his area in Russia, where healthcare isn't very good, has few hospitals and very few doctors overall to speak of. And there, the doctors, the few who are there, would do the following to make their work. To make things easier, when people come in with pain that's hard to control, they simply put them under general anesthesia for a short period of time to help manage the situation. And after the general anesthesia, the pain's gone, then later it comes back and they give another general anesthesia. And he had always wondered how that works, and my explanatory model completely opened his eyes to what's actually going on for the first time ever. Exciting, isn't it? You know, I've been saying for actually 38 years now that most surgeries in the musculoskeletal field are basically unnecessary, and I still stand by that claim to this day, that they're malpractice, that they actually don't make any sense. And now, over 30 years later, people are slowly realizing that there's too much surgery. So right now, there's a study from the health insurers, I don't even know which one, we'll link it down below. They found that, I think for back pain, it's around 85% more or less. For knee pain, I think 90% of the surgeries are unnecessary, insurers say. They consider many operations pointless. Official opinion now, and they're right about that. That's exactly what I just explained a moment or two ago, actually. And that's another nice example of what often happens around here. What I said decades ago is now pretty much standard. It's been scientifically proven and is slowly being picked up and adopted throughout the field and widely embraced. I just wonder why it takes so long, but that seems to be the case. Now back to our sciatica problem, which of course started in the back, but like I said, there are also pains attributed to sciatica that first become noticeable in the glutes, often presenting as a deep, aching discomfort. You remember I said, how can that be? Something's getting pinched around the discs, and down there in the glutes, it really starts to hurt noticeably more than before. That doesn't make sense, and I also think it's a misunderstanding, which isn't true for me. Let's dive into a rather interesting event that's going on in the glutes. Like I said, the nerve fibers come together here, and then the nerve comes out here as one, runs down the back of the leg, and there's a muscle sitting there, lying right alongside it and following that same course along its length. The piriformis muscle, it runs across here. That's called the piriformis gap. And that's slowly even caught on in conventional medicine now. It's still often not diagnosed, but at least it's become increasingly accepted by many clinicians that there really is a physical narrowing there. What I've been saying all along and for decades is that muscles and fascia really pull too hard. Now picture the nerve coming out here. And my finger is the muscle that runs over it, and the muscle is way too tight, painfully and constantly tense all the time. What does it do? It presses the nerve here against the pelvic bone. And the moment a nerve is pressed, a lot happens in that nerve. Like the metabolism changes, because a nerve is blood supplied, materials go in, substances go out, waste products, there are all kinds of components in there. Then the nerve sheath, it's all pressure sensitive, which leads to reduced nerve conduction speed, to tingling and often swelling, impaired nutrient exchange, pain, numbness, and other odd sensations. Symptoms that can significantly affect daily activities. To numbness, to burning, all those different sensations are exactly the ones you know from your glutes too. Especially when you sit or move, you feel them often. Where do you feel the sciatica in your glutes most? Almost always when I'm driving, especially on longer trips. You get in the car and it's fine for half an hour, then after half an hour it kicks in and your glutes start hurting. And then you shift to the other side, then that side starts hurting too, back and forth and all that. So the problem just keeps getting bigger and worse over time. And again, it's just like in the other example with the back pain I explained about that this muscle, because we don't move around enough and stay too sedentary for long periods, into every nook and cranny, tensing more and more, having to hold on even harder, swelling up much thicker, and then eventually pressing on the nerve. And the moment you go in and normalize that piriformis and the whole musculature in the glutes, which together also produce one overall function, one combined compressive force, The tension eases and the load gets redistributed so the pressure is relieved. This problem can be partially resolved already after the first step, which could be a treatment with our osteopressure or a Liebscher-Bracht exercise that specifically targets this area. It's already noticeably reduced and goes away completely and fully after a few days, even if it had been present for many months or years beforehand, and in some cases was already being labeled chronic by specialists. What's going on when a pain lasts that long? It persists because excessive tension in the muscles and fascia refuses to let go until the tightness eases. As soon as that's reduced, chronic pain suddenly turns into just normal pain that goes away. So please also let go of that idea many people have that it's become chronic and will remain a permanent condition for the rest of your life. Becoming chronic is also explained by a pain memory. South. It's explained like this. A chronic pain was once and there used to be a reason for the pain, there was some reason, then that reason disappeared. But the brain now remembers the pain and keeps generating it, continuing to produce persistent pain signals. I've always thought that too. What kind of nonsense is that? Why would the brain remember something that doesn't make any sense? There used to be a reason for the pain. And the brain kind of gets tricked. It's too dumb to realize the pain doesn't make sense anymore, but it still keeps on hurting all the same, really stubbornly. That always made me go, what's going on there? And eventually, I figured out what had obviously happened. Because what happened? More and more research looked into how non-specific pain develops. Researchers dug further into the causes. Yeah, because chronic pain is non-specific. There isn't any truly obvious structural damage to be found anywhere. You can tell that's what it's all about. So if there's no reason for it, then what's most likely to happen next after that? So they call it non-specific, then they blame the psyche, and they also blame the pain memory itself as the cause. Because what did they find? In chronic pain patients who are suffering badly, they did brain scans. They did brain scans and found, people who suffer have a different brain structure than those who don't, showing how chronic pain alters the brain. So the brain's changed. Now we must find drugs to bring it back to normal, medicines that correct those changes and restore function. That was the logic. But I'm saying a disaster of flawed thinking happened, and it caused real serious harm. I think the idea of a pain memory is a colossal mistake, because I'm pretty sure, and I'm talking about doctors and professors and other people who do studies, many of whom, frankly, still hold very serious reservations about it, in my view. I'm addressing them here. Please do a study with us. I claim this. Take a person who has a changed brain structure due to long-standing chronic pain, and closely monitor how that altered brain pattern evolves over time, and free them from their pain. Then the brain will, I'd guess in just a few weeks, start changing back fairly quickly again, because the brain is constantly adapting to the situation. And conversely, I'd say, the change in brain structure came about because someone who hadn't suffered before was suddenly suffering, and that ongoing, sustained distress gradually reshaped neural networks and their activity and their function over time. Is really in pain, suffering endlessly and constantly. Of course, the brain changes then, in my view. That's just my hunch, yeah. But please back that up with robust scientific studies, though. I think a whole lot's really going to come to light about what was misinterpreted. Back again to the joint pain. The moment the tension here is released, the nerve is perfused normally again, back to normal, so decompressed where the compression was ended, and normal blood flow and function are restored. It will behave normally again and won't hurt anymore. But I'll say straight away, it's not a one-dimensional process. There's more going on under the surface, involving several interacting factors. I figure it's not just the nerve that contributes to this glute pain there, but that there's also some alarm pain going on, and maybe overload pain too, along with a few other contributing factors. Now, I should briefly explain what we mean by overload pain. But you can totally see that yourself. The moment when I'll take the bottle, I'll pick up this bottle and hold it in front of me, right here at chest level, just like this, you know? Yeah, I'm well trained now. I can likely hold it for a long time. But if there were a heavier weight, or if a weaker person who isn't used to it was holding the bottle, after a while they'd start to feel it more and more, and their arms would begin to tremble and get noticeably tired. Oh, that's tiring. Then you get a slight pain, then a stronger pain, and at some point it starts burning there. Like a nerve's inflamed. I say it like that on purpose, even though we all know, you know it, I know it, everyone watching knows it, it doesn't burn because a nerve's inflamed, not literally, of course, but because the muscle just gives out. Any of you who do strength training, if you train with heavy weights, then you know when you train really intensely, it burns, and nobody even gives it a second thought. Nobody really talks about chronic pain or anything like that. Everyone knows it's normal. A stressed muscle really burns. And I think that even here in this area, those different pulls and tensions that develop push muscles to the edge of their capacity, gradually overloading them until they start to burn and protest, and even cause a dull spreading ache that clearly signals strain. But the nice thing is, whether it's coming from the nerve that's getting pinched or from the muscle sitting on top of it that's burning, it all feels the same in that very spot. Doesn't matter. We release the tension. Then it all lets go and the pain goes away. Let's go down one level further. Here, along these two flexor muscles, there's chronic tension here as well. Why does that happen? Because we sit so much, and when we're sitting, like I said before, the knee stays fixed at a 90-degree angle right here exactly. So that means the flexors, which would normally be longer when the leg is like that, end up being actually somewhat shorter overall. That means you also end up with a complete shortening and noticeably increased muscular tightness in the back of the thighs. And you probably know that from your own experience. So if you don't regularly train or balance it out, I'd bet that when you bend forward with straight knees, you'll notice the restricted range of motion. You might only reach knee height, then it gets tough and starts to hurt. Where? In the back of the knee. The back of the knee. We just noticed that when you bend forward, the back of the knee starts to hurt. And we had said it's likely to get painful if you push it further. That the sciatic nerve can cause pain behind the knee due to irritation or compression higher up in the lower back region. Do you notice that? So, in my view, the pain at the back of the knee is actually much more likely related to a shortening right here. And if the back of the knee hurts and the back also, then all the more so. And like I said, even if the nerve's involved because it's being pushed on too hard by that tension, maybe, but it always comes along with an overload of the muscles and fascia that run through that area, adding prolonged extra strain. And there are, of course, symptom relief and targeted exercises that go straight at this problem and normalize that tension again, which makes the pain go away, no matter what the structure looks like. And last but not least, we're now moving on to the calf and the pain there as well, that run all the way down into the foot. We just showed it a moment ago. Here the calf is shortened. Above all, the gastrocnemius, that's this large bulging muscle right back here. There's another one positioned underneath, the soleus, but it stays untouched by squats since it only reaches up to about here on the lower part of the calf. But the gastrocnemius, which forms the main bulk of the calf muscle, basically runs up from the tendon that feeds into the Achilles, right up here, as you can see. It then becomes muscle, crosses the joint, and then turns back into a tendon that's basically attached right there, just slightly above the joint itself. And that's why it's considerably longer in that particular position than it is in the other one, especially when you're sitting. And once again, sitting really plays an important role here. And it's the same here, in my experience, in our experience with back pain patients. It almost never actually has anything at all to do with the sciatic nerve itself being affected. Remember, if something above is affected, pain should be below. It seems more unlikely, even in healthy people. This calf is a common problem because a lot of people, especially as they get older, get calf cramps at night, have real trouble and don't know why. They often wake up from sudden recurring pains and are puzzled about the cause. And the explanation is that they sit too much and don't really use their calf muscles enough. So then I've gone and made a whole bunch of claims now. Or maybe you're not even so sure yet. Is that actually really true? Could it be? And now I've got a really great tip for you. Please don't believe me. Don't believe any doctor. Don't believe any physio. Don't believe a video. Don't believe that it's written in any book. The only person you should trust or believe in is yourself. Truly trust your own judgment above anyone else's. Simply try our Liebscher and Bracht exercises or our therapy. Get yourself seen by one of our doctors or physios or whoever's trained in this, a naturopath. Just let them treat you and tune in. Then trust your body and you'll know that you're on the right path. So now I sincerely hope you'll get rid of your pain really fast and for good.